Hello, my name is Ariel, and thank you for joining our refresher course on understanding the equipment console. The equipment console, formerly known as the chassis manager, is designed to streamline the process of reconciling chassis and per diem charges. Agents are expected to invoice chassis charges on the freight bill under daily chassis charges. However, if they're unable to do so, the equipment console allows the agents to easily answer for chassis and or per diem charges and see the status of each charge. As a collector, you may be thinking, how is the equipment console useful for us? And that's a great question. The equipment console is used to verify if Evans was billed for chassis or per diem charges. A customer may receive a freight bill and question the chassis charges on that invoice. Before revising a freight invoice to remove chassis, please be sure to confirm if Evans was billed directly for usage. If Evans was billed for chassis or per diem, the charges and details will be in the equipment console. So let's dive in and check out the equipment console. As you can see, signing into the equipment console is very similar to signing into the agent portal. You have two username options. You can sign in with an agent code or with the Corp login. Me personally, I prefer to sign in with the Corp login. That way, if I want to check several different pros on my portfolios or statements, I can stay logged in under Corp without having to log in as an agent, a different agent each time. Both passwords and usernames for this login is saved in one password, so you will need to be signed in to one password to access the passwords for the chassis manager. Whether you're signed in as Corp or an agent, each time you log in, this alert will pop up on the screen. When you see this alert, please select No. But don't be afraid if you happen to make a mistake and select yes, it doesn't ruin anything in the system, but it will run a report. Sometimes it takes a little while for that report to run, but it's not necessary for us to run that for what we're looking for in the chassis manager. So if you can always be sure to select no when you see this alert. Once you select no, you'll be taken into the dashboard. From here, you're able to start your search for charges for chassis and or per diem. And you would do that search by filling out the filters you see here at the bottom of the screen. I received an email from my customer and they're disputing the chassis charges that were billed on Pro TUL 211504. They're asking for me to remove the charges, citing that they were billed directly by the steamship line. But before I remove those charges, I want to confirm that Evans was not billed. So I logged into the equipment console and I began to search. So first, you always want to check your date range. Each time you log into the equipment console, there is a pre-selected date range, and most of the time your invoice will fall within that usage. If not, instead of using the pre-selected dates, you can select all to the left and it'll pull up all the dates in the chassis manager. That way you don't have to worry about going back into the gate tickets or going back and trying to pull up the invoice to figure out when did it outgate to try to select the date range. If it doesn't fall within the selected dates when you log in, just go ahead and hit all and it'll save you some time in your search. Next, we want to filter out how we're searching. So we could either search by the steamship line invoice number, which is could be a chassis provider number as well. We can search by the pro number, a chassis number, or a container number. I always recommend by starting your search with the pro number, which is what I did here. I put in TUL 211504. Once you have your date range selected and your pro number entered, be sure that you click the box at the end that says show billed items. Each time you're searching for charges, you want to make sure that box is checked because we want the system to show us the billed items. So once everything is entered, we want to hit the refresh button. Once you hit refresh, the system is going to start searching for chassis and or per diem charges related to the pro number that you entered. After hitting refresh, the equipment console searched the system for chassis charges related to this pro number. And at the top here, you can see it didn't return any results. It says no data available in table. After you have searched for chassis usage and you were sure to make sure that box was checked to show build items, this is showing us that no chassis charges have been billed to this pro number. But keep in mind, this system matches the chassis we are billed as closely as possible, but it is not always exact. To be 100% sure that we were not invoiced, you should also search by the chassis number for chassis bills and by the container number for per diem or demurrage bills. To be 100% sure, before I go back to the customer and remove those chassis charges, I'm going to go into Award and pull up the bill details. And on the header tab, you'll find the chassis number. Right here where it says current location is our chassis number for this container and this pro. So I copy and pasted that chassis number from Aurora and plugged it into the chassis filter in the equipment console. My date range is still fine. I made sure to check show bill items and I refreshed the screen so it could find any charges related to this chassis usage. So always keep in mind when you're reviewing chassis charges, you want to make sure you're matching up your chassis number with the container number and the dates that could have been billed on those gate tickets. So now if we look here at the screen, starting from the left, we can see none of these TUL loads listed are the pro number that we're looking for. We can see if we come over to the far right that it is the chassis number, but in the last column, there's container numbers. In Aurora, our container number doesn't match any of these containers that are billed here for this chassis usage. So now we can be 100% sure that Evans was not billed for chassis usage related to this container. If you find no charges in the equipment console and wish to remove the chassis charges from the freight bill, you will need to discuss this with the agent as the chassis team did not bill the charges and cannot authorize the removal from the customer's bill. Please remember if Evans was not billed for chassis, the agent will only be deducted for the commission they received, which can be found in EBH. So this situation is similar to the one before. I received an email from my customer after they received invoice XDT 120714 citing that they believed they would be billed directly for chassis and wanted the charges to be removed from their invoice. So before removing the charges, I came to the equipment console to see if Evans had been billed. I did not have to change the date range because the usage fell in the pre-selected dates when I logged in. And as stated before, I always recommend searching with the pro number first. So that's what I did. I put in the pro number in that filter box and then I checked show build items and refreshed the screen. So unlike the last time there was data available, it did return charges billed to Evans. So I can see that Evans received an invoice from a chassis provider. We get the chassis provider's name. We can see that Evans was invoiced for 4 days, which is the same amount of days XDT, the agent, invoiced the customer for. We get to see what days um, the chassis was in and out. We get the chassis number and the container number and the customer that's being billed. So all this information is available in the equipment console if Evans was billed for charges. So that means we could go back to the customer and confirm that Evans indeed was billed for these charges. We have a invoice number, we have the same amount of days they were billed, the in and out days. So the customer would be responsible for paying Evans for these invoice days unless they can show that they were also billed for the same days. In this scenario, you wouldn't see these days billed on an A bill because the agent billed the correct amount of chassis days on the freight bill, which again, I'm breaking down those two columns, which the invoice days is the days Evans was billed for usage. Days billed are the days that the agent billed to the customer on a freight invoice. Duplicate match. We've probably all seen it before. You're in the equipment console and you're searching to confirm if Evans was billed, and you look in that agent and corp status and you see duplicate match. And you're wondering, what do I do or go from here? Always keep in mind that a duplicate match does not mean Evans has not been billed for chassis. A duplicate match means the chassis or container is already in the console under a different pro number and or invoice number. Try searching by the chassis number to see what comes up, and hopefully that will help you figure out the information that you need. For chassis charges, a duplicate will be other moves where a chassis is used around that same billing period. And for per diem, a duplicate match will typically be tied to a street turned container. And here is a perfect example of what a duplicate match invoice looks like in the equipment console. So if you can see at the top, the first pro number HTP 102199 is marked as the duplicate. And if we come down and look at the bottom at the XDT 120714 invoice, this is the one that was actually billed to the customer. We can see the same chassis provider, it's the same invoice number, the same in and out dates, same chassis, and same container. So this is just a situation where the equipment console matched these charges up based on this duplicate information. Both agents have both entered the same usage for chassis in the agent portal, and that's how these charges were matched. After HTP went in and marked their load as a duplicate, the charges were billed under the correct pro to the correct customer. In the equipment console, you can also find two tabs that can be very useful when researching per diem or chassis charges. The first tab is status history. The status history will show you when an item was uploaded into the console and each state the line item was placed in. So if we can see in the image below, this is related to that HTP duplicate match we just reviewed on the previous slide. We can see when it was uploaded into the chassis manager and when the agent reviewed it, and then they came back and marked it as a duplicate match. A very another useful tab is the Notes tab. The Notes tab will provide communication between the agent and the chassis team. So if we look at the notes related to this duplicate matched HTTP invoice, we can see the agent came back and said, please bill XDT for these charges. This was a brokered load. Then the chassis team updated their note with dupe, status changed to duplicate match, and this load was then billed under the correct pro number, which we saw as well on the previous slide. It was billed under XDT. So our notes can be very useful when we're trying to figure out what happened with an invoice or with a duplicate match, because most of the time they're going to leave a note so the chassis team knows what to do with those charges. If an agent does not bill enough chassis days on the freight bill, an accessorial invoice will be created to bill the customer for any additional days we were billed by the steamship line. As you can see from the screenshot below from the equipment console, Evans was invoiced for 15 days, but the agent only billed the customer for 8 days. So this A bill was created to bill the customer for the 7 remaining days. So a lot of times you may get pushback from your customer, or they just might not understand why they're being charged twice, or they may think they've already paid those charges. So by coming into the equipment console, you can have a clear breakdown of what happened here because it's showing us as clear as day that we were billed for 15, but only billed the customer for 8. And that's why these additional 7 days are being billed. So remember when reviewing chassis charges to focus on the chassis number, container, and the dates invoice to confirm that the charges belong to your customer or your pro. If a customer received an accessorial bill, then Evans was billed for the charges. Accessorial invoices should only be canceled if the chassis or per diem team has authorized you to do so. To determine if that team was instructed to build the correct move, they will need the chassis providers or the steamship line invoice number and name. This information can be found in the body of the invoice and should be placed in the subject line of the email so the right team member will know to look at it. If you just put a pro, then everyone needs to look, and things like that are usually saved for free time, hoping someone else will do the work. So, for quick resolution, please be sure to put that chassis provider or steamship line invoice number and name in the subject line. When sending a list of moves that need to be checked, please add a column and add the chassis provider or steamship line invoice numbers. Also, be sure to provide the chassis team and or the per diem team with details as to why the customer and or the agent is disputing the charges. Please just don't send an email that says chassis denied. They want to know why the customer is denying the chassis where they built directly. Are we billing the wrong container? Does the charges not belong to that customer? Have they already paid them? Please provide as much information in your initial email for quick resolution. A, B, C, and I've even seen down to GH bills are not always duplicates. We are invoiced by the month for most chassis charges. If there are multiple accessorial bills for monthly usage, the invoice number should be different on each accessorial bill. This would indicate that we are accruing chassis charges because the unit has not engaged. So please make sure you are looking at the details before you write off some of these additional invoices as duplicates. The equipment console is pulling information from the agent portal. So keep in mind, anytime you revise an invoice in Aurora, the charges remain the same in the agent portal. If an agent advises to have chassis charges added to the freight bill, and the chassis team has already loaded the charges in the equipment console, they have no way of knowing that you added DCC charges in Aurora. However, they can see a miscellaneous adjustment made payable to the agent in the amount of commission they would have earned if they had billed chassis on the freight bill. When making revisions, please be sure to note the amount of chassis days that are being added in the reason field in the chargeback system. This will lower the chance of the customer being billed twice for the same chassis usage. Thank you for taking the time to watch our refresher course on understanding the equipment console. I hope you found this information useful. If you can think of any Other issues that have come up recently or repeatedly that you feel like I have not addressed in this webinar, please let me know and I will happily review them with you. I'm always available via Teams, email, and by phone. If you're in the PTW office, you can always stop by my desk and ask me questions at any time. And again, thank you for joining. Be sure to click the link in the description to take a short quiz. Have a great day.